let me welcome each of you this morning. We are so grateful to have you all with us today. We're excited for this is actually our first McNair Research Symposium, which is a part of our 31st annual UMBC McNair Research Conference. Today we have 9 of our McNair scholars from across the country who will be sharing their research with members of our National Science members of the National Science Foundation, as well as the Department of Ed. And this partnership, we're so grateful that and honored that both NSF and Department of Ed came to us, the UMBC McNair program, to say we want to work with you and we want to build something great. And I threw out the idea. They was like, so what are you thinking? And I just threw out this crazy idea that we would put together a symposium as a part of the conference, but pull some of the students whose research was very interesting and who even shared details about what it meant for them to be transformative scholars on their student profile form. That's what we really used, and read your responses, and my goodness, we were both pleased, we were excited, and I tell you, I'm be honest with you, I was proud. As I sent the list and said, these are the students who we have chosen to be a part of this because they represent the best of the best. But not only that, these students, their research and where they're going, I mean, I just believe that in the future, within the 10 years, as we talk about McNair, these are going to be our doctors and our future leaders here in the U.S. And so we are grateful, one, to the students. I always honor you, your presence. I want you to know that we are doing this not just for you, but because of you. You are the shoulders that we are standing on too. I'm looking forward to y'all being the ones who lead this country and lead this world moving forward. And I already see it happening with you all, looking at your research and all. So as a part of the UMBC McNair community, I want to welcome you all scholars to this space, because this space is because of you. And then I want to thank our sponsors, NSF, as well as Department of Ed, for taking this time, because when we were sitting around the table, what they mentioned, which is a part of my philosophy around holistic critical mentorship, they used the words reciprocity. They said, we want to give and we want to receive. And so they're here to hear your research, to talk to you, to answer questions, to ask questions of you, and to be engaged with you today, as they also share resources with you for future opportunities at NSF, both now as undergrads and graduate students. And then what we're asking you all to do, not everyone is here, right? So as I said, some of our students are gone on cultural visits this morning, but you all are coming from other communities. And so if this information pertains to you and or your colleagues back at home, we want you to take it back to them and say, hey, you need to look at this. You need to connect with this person, et cetera, from NSF. So take the most of this opportunity and note that they are here because they wanted to be present with you. So I want to say thank you all for your time here. I put in the chat the website that has the program order for us today. And so I'm going to move forward and introduce our senior management and program analyst for the U.S. Department of Ed, who will then share Dr. Rashawn Moore. And then we'll hear from Carmen Gordon, the program lead of McNair with the U.S. Department of Education. And then we will hear from Sharice Carney-Nuez, who is the Deputy Division Director for the Division of Graduate Education for the NSF Directorate for STEM Education. So they'll come in that order and just share with you for a few moments. And we'll try to stay on schedule as much as we can. I know I talk a lot, and so we're going to ask y'all to make it smaller, but if we're behind a little bit, don't worry, we'll catch up. Dr. Moore.
Good morning. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Happy Friday, everyone. I am so delighted to be here and to be a part of this conversation. I have had a great week. I started the week off on Tuesday with the McNair program directors from all across the country, a part of the Council for Opportunity National Conference. And to end the week with McNair Scholars is a wonderful bookend. And that demonstrates how we're all committed to the cause of making sure that our programs and our participants succeed. So at the of Education, I first want to bring you greetings from our division, the Graduate Special Focus Programs Division. You'll hear from Carmen Gordon, but we also have several of the education program specialists that may be on the call: Suzanne Armour, Eric Lane, and Rebecca L. But also our senior director, JB Watts, is very committed to our programs and wants to make sure that you all succeed. We also have the very fortunate opportunity to have Amanda Miller, who is our Deputy Assistant Secretary, who is very passionate about the work that we do for the McNair program. So I just want to say congratulations to you, and you are a part of a very rich legacy. Dr. Ronald E. McNair served this country so well, and you all are following in that footstep. And you all will definitely solve problems in this country, in this world, and you will make a difference. So I'm looking forward to seeing how things work out for each of you, whether you choose to be faculty, whether you choose to do research, whether you choose to work at one of the federal agencies or within the private sector. The sky is definitely the limit. So thank you for an opportunity to listen in today, and I look forward to hearing about your progress. Thank you, Michael, for this opportunity, and I will turn it over to Carmen.
Well, Dr. Moore is a tough act to follow this morning. Good morning to all of you, and thank you, Rashawn, for setting the tone for this morning's event. I too am really excited to be with you. I certainly thank you all for the invitation to join you and be a part of such a wonderful exchange and presentation. Definitely looking forward to hearing some of the wonderful research presentations from our illustrious students. I would also say that what I've observed the most and what I'm impressed about most of all among our students would have to be how not only brilliant and ingenuitive and creative minded you all are with regard to your areas of research, but just also simply how appreciative and respectful and humble and generous in spirit all of you are, and the ways that you demonstrate that among your colleagues, your peers, and to your home communities. What I've seen over the years is how not only do you work very diligently and with such resilience and focus in completing your degree program, but then you are so generous-hearted that you literally return to your home communities and pay it forward and find and identify students who are very similar to yourselves and literally take them by the hand and mentor them to the same level of success that you've experienced. So I'd like to applaud each of you for your successes and contributions to your respective fields in research thus far, and certainly congratulations in advance for all of the wonderful successes and accomplishments that you will experience in the years to come. So thank you for having me this morning, along with Dr. Moore and our other ed colleagues. And I certainly look forward to hearing future wonderful things from each of you. Thank you.
So good morning, I'm next. My name is Charisse Carney Nunez, and I am the Deputy Division Director for the Division of Graduate Education within the Directorate for STEM Education at NSF. And like my colleagues at the Department of Ed and what you've already heard, I am so excited to be here. It's wonderful to see each and every one of you. We are really excited to have the opportunity to learn about your research. And also, we're really excited to share some NSF opportunities with you. And to be sure, there are opportunities available at NSF for every step in your academic career. My favorite one to highlight is the GRFP program, the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, which is run out of my division, the Division of Graduate Education. We are really looking hard at undergraduates and increasing our number of applications from undergraduates. And it's just not too early to start thinking about your GRFP application ever. And so you'll hear more on that later. And I'm also excited to highlight the ETAP website. Now, ETAP, we've all heard about research experiences for undergraduates. I think many of you probably have heard about that. But ETAP is like a one-stop shop where you can find transformative experiences like REUs, but even more. And it's new at NSF, and we're really building it up. And there are just more and more opportunities that are all being placed in this one place to make it easy for you guys to find them. And so that's etap.nsf.gov. You'll hear more details on both GRFP and ETAP later. But my job right now is to just thank you. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for spending the next few hours with us. And we really hope that this will increase your interest and participation in NSF programs and activities, both now and in the future. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're going to get right into it. The way we have this set up is students, you will, those who are doing oral, you will do just like you would have in person, 10 minutes, sort of to give your presentation, and about 5 minutes Q&A. We'll make up the time. Like, I think sometimes Q&As are shorter than that time. So I think we'll make up the 5 minutes that we're sort of a little behind right now, but don't worry, you will have your time. We'll make sure everyone shares and get us any questions that are there. And then this is also where we're asking you students to engage with each other too. So if you got a question for the presenters, like, share the question. So this isn't just, we made this a meeting style rather than a webinar style, so that we could have dialogue and conversations together as you all desire. So be ready to do that. Poster presenters, you'll do a 5 minute, you'll have 5 minutes to sort of share, and we'll do those together. So the first person, second person, third person, and then we'll give 5 minutes for conversation or so with you all questions. So we'll try to stick with that as much as we can. All right, so we'll begin with Michael. Are you ready?
Yes.
Awesome.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Share. Share. And okay. Okay, so hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Michael. I'm a McNair scholar from Binghamton University. And during my 14 months of working on the cytotoxicity of commercial tattoo pigment under Dr. Work, who is a experimental chemist. And during the summer, I get co-advised with Dr. Pelletier in the Pelletier group of looking at the computational side of my project. So it's my honor to present my research to the 31st to the NSF 31st Research at Baltimore conference. And without further ado, let's dig through my research. So our research focuses on how does tattoo industry and how do they make their products. So in a typical scenario where an individual are looking for a tattoo, they will seek a tattoo store and they want to get a tattoo. So this is a skin model where you have your epidermis, your outermost layer, and your dermis layer. So when you select your pigment, your ink of choice, the tattoo artist will insert the tattoo ink, and the ink will be inserted through your epidermis layer to your dermis layer, while the ink dispersed through your dermis layer. And there will be white blood cells, specifically the macrophages, that will engulf the ink. And because the white blood cells are not able to fully decompose the ink, it remains on your dermis layer, which shows the tattoo that you have on your skin. So tattoo industries, there's not much regulation from the FDA because they are considered as cosmetic, and there's not much regulation from the tattoo ink industry, and the tattoo ink industry are not required to provide any sort of labeling for consumers or even tattoo projects. tattoo artists. Something interesting was in countries such as Germany, a pigment blue 15 and pigment green 7, they are banned because they saw there's some toxic level in their research. But however, in the United States, when they did some testing on these pigment, they didn't see any like toxic effect. So these pigment are still commonly used in the United States. So moving on to what my area of focus is, these are some common pigments that are present in commercial tattoo companies. These come in form of powder, where we have stocked them in our lab, and we are looking at specific functional groups, which are the highlighted one, the not double bonded nitrogen. These azo bonds are interesting, and we are focusing on how does these azo functional group that are contained that we are focusing on these pigment that contains these azo functional group and seeing whether they have any toxic effect when being exposed onto human skin cells. So for the experimental setup of this experiment, we create different kind of dilution of these pigment, and we expose them to BJ fibroblast skin cells, which is a type of skin cell that is very commonly used. We expose them in increasing concentration and incubate them for 24 hours without any exposure of light. After the 24 hours of exposure, we perform neutral red assay, which measure for cell availability, meaning that after 24 hours of exposing to these different dilution of pigments, we are recording how many cells are alive, how much cells are dead with corresponding concentration. Another assay that we did was the Elmer Blue assay, which measured for cell metabolic activity, meaning that after exposing to pigments at increasing concentration, we are interested in seeing how does the cell respond to the condition that they are put on. And these results are collected from a plate reader that emit from 530 nanometer to 645 nanometers. So this is a neutral red assay result graph that we have. So let's take some common pigment that shows the similar color. So we have 3 different kind of pigment red, but they all have different functional group. One pigment red 254 is a non-azo, pigment red 170 is an azo, and pigment red 38 has a diazo. So after we follow the procedure of creating dilution and exposing them to fibroblast skin cells, we see that there's a trend of all 3 pigments that as we increase the concentration, the cells are slowly dying. And this brought to our attention, like if cells are dying, then there should be something wrong with the cells. And same thing with Elmer Blue assay. There's a trend of like, as we increase the concentration of the pigments, we see a decreasing trend of cell metabolic activity, meaning that as the cells are being exposed to these harmful conditions, the pigments, the different concentration of these pigments, the cells are responding they are not responding as they are responding, but they are decreased. Their way of recovering from the situation, the environment is decreasing. And another pigment that was surprising was another azo pigment yellow 74. Is an azo pigment, and from the Elmer Blue and neutral red assay, we can see that it follows the trend of as we increase in the concentration, both cell availability and cell vitality decreased by a lot. So this brings to my attention of, so does some pigment are more toxic than others, or it just depends on the molecular formula itself? So in the past study in the Thai group, they did some study on specifically pigment yellow 74, where they exposed light to it, and then they record 3 different structures as a result. And one of the structures that they found from the fragmentation of exposing light to it is that they found this 2-methoxy-5-nitroaniline, which is extremely toxic when being exposed to humans. So her study focuses on how, with the exposure of having a UV light, visible light, and the heat, it leads to similar reaction of this photo degradation of pigment yellow 74. So my interest is, how does visible light, like light from the sun, affect photo degradation? Because as a human being, when we get tattooed at certain common areas like the arm, your hand, we are exposed to light almost every day. And we are interested in seeing how does tattoo, when being exposed to a visible light, affect it breaking apart in our skin, and if there's any like toxic component byproduct being formed during the process. So that's when I decided to move on, continue the project through the computational perspective of seeing how does the molecule shape, how does each atom interact with each other through Gaussian, and calculating time-dependent density functional theory, and seeing how does the electrons within each molecular structure shift when light is being exposed to it. So we were able to find a few X-ray structures from literature review, and luckily we were able to find what we have and on literature. So pigment red 254 is one of the common pigment that we have in lab, and we found X-ray structure on. And I did an optimization of this X-ray structure, and from the UV vis, we can see that the emission light, our interest emission light is 491 nanometers. And when performing a TD-DFT, we see that when in the ground state, the electron is being localized by the 5-member ring. And when we expose the light, we see that there's not much change in the atom to atom bond, and the electron is still being localized around the same atom. But when we look at azole pigment, for example, pigment red 170, which is also what we have in lab and is common in tattoo industries, this emission light is around 470 nanometers. And when we calculate how does electron move when we expose light to it, we see that the electrons are being, in the ground state, the electrons are being localized by the 6-member ring. And when we shine light to it, when we excite the electrons in their excited state, we can see that there's an anti-bonding between the nitrogen-nitrogen bond, which is the azole bond that we're interested in. And from that, we can infer that there's something that's going on with the double bonded nitrogen, and it might be the reason, it might be the way that when we hit light to it, it cleaves us off. So that is something interesting that we found when when I was calculating it through the computational perspective of tattoo pigments. So in the future, I am trying to optimize and create more common pigments through X-ray structures, because so far there's not much common pigment of X-ray structure available in the computational perspective. So I would like to be able to create and have optimized structure of these common pigment and calculate their TD-DFT and see whether their atom-atom interaction, or how does exposing light onto these specific pigments will have any effect in their fragmentation. And for the experimental part of my project, I would like to start exposing, I would like to repeat the process of exposing our skin cells to various concentration of pigments, but in addition, with the exposure of constant light. In our previous research, we exposed our cells just to pigment, but without any light. Right now, we are interested in seeing how does exposing light, adding the light component to our research, to our cells, will have any will the trend change, or will it have more effect on the skin cells? And lastly, I would like to thank NIH for the funding, and Dr. Stork and Dr. Pelletier for their amazing mentorship, and members of the Stork Lab and member of the Pelletier Lab. Last but not least, I would like to thank Regina Nguyen. She was our former McNair Scholars Assistant Director. Without her mentorship and without her help, I will not get this far. I will not see my research in different perspectives, in different angle, and how can I approach my research. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Is there any questions?
Hi. Sorry. Do you mind going to our last slide where you said like, what do you plan to do in the future with the green pigment?
Yeah, so because pigment green 7 and pigment blue 15 are banned in Germany, especially in the UK, and the United States are still using these pigments. So it'll be interesting to see how, if we expose light to it, or how does the atom interaction when we expose light to it will have any effect. Like, we are interested in seeing the process of exposing light to these pigment. How does the cleavage happen? How does the molecular structure breaks off? And if the byproduct being formed by the cleavage will have any like side effect or be any toxic effect to the human health. These are just the two common pigments that we're interested, but there's also a lot of different common pigments that has azo-diazo bonds. We are also interested in seeing those.
Awesome. Thank you. McLeod, and then we'll move on to the next person.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I wanted to ask a question. This is a very unique research. So I wanted to ask, how did you come up with the idea, or was there a specific scenario that you noticed that motivated you to go on and do this research?
To be completely honest, I was lucky when I was looking to research group, and then my primary advisor, Dr. Sork, he's one of the few researcher that does tattoos within the United States. And when I applied to his research lab, there's a position in this project, and then I was just lucky, and then I got it in. But at the same time, my family members, they all had tattoo, but they're saying that I shouldn't get one, but they never told me the reason. So like, I wanted to know more the reason why. So that's why I continued with this project and wanting to know more about whether tattoos are really harmful or not really harmful.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause. And if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to them via the chat privately, or you will see them during the conference this week. So definitely connect with them. All right, we're going to move on to Giovanni.
Okay, great. Let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see? Okay.
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay, great. So hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this presentation. Today, I'm going to be talking about the work I conducted at the University of New Mexico, working with Dr. Rafael Fierro from the Agile Manufacturing Laboratory on robotic satellite repair, and specifically on our work with orbital replacement units. So first, I'll begin by talking a little bit about the current field of space robotics and their applications. Space robots is an active research field with a large focus on three main research areas: inspection, manufacturing, and servicing. Here on the left, we can see the Canada robot arm located on the International Space Station that is used for grabbing cargo ships in space. The middle photo is a conceptual drawing by NASA of a multi-limbed robot assembling a telescope mirror assembly in orbit. And on the right, we have a rendering of NASA's IRIS robot inspecting the International Space Station. The work I'll be presenting here today relates to the field of orbital servicing, and here are two examples of robots that perform such tasks, one by Picnic Robotics and the other by Northrop Grumman. So currently, the only way to perform in-orbit repairs of space structures is by having astronauts physically repair items in space during spacewalks. Here we can see two NASA astronauts installing a new satellite array on board of the International Space Station in 2021. These missions are extremely resource intensive and put astronauts' lives at risk in every mission, which makes it a perfect task for robots to take over. The video I just showed you was a short clip of an 8.5-hour spacewalk to repair a damaged solar panel module. And this work is physically and mentally taxing for the astronauts, and replacing them with robots seems like a worthwhile effort. And also, by creating robotic repair systems, we'll be able to repair satellites that are not easily accessible to humans or astronauts today. Robotic servicing of satellites would not only be safer for astronauts, it would also significantly reduce the quantity of space pollution in orbit around Earth. On the right, we can see a visualization developed by NASA in 2014 documenting space debris orbiting around Earth. This debris increases the potential danger to all space vehicles, including the International Space Station, which has humans aboard. So the issue is, we know orbital robotics is hard, so how can we make it easier for our robots to repair damaged satellites? Our laboratory identified orbital replacement units, or ORUs, as being a good solution. They're modules on a satellite that are designed to be easily replaced for servicing or assembly, and they're beneficial for three main reasons. The first is that they're able to simplify satellite servicing for robotic systems. The second is that they allow satellites the capability to be upgraded after launch. This means that satellites would no longer be seen as single-use tools, and if, let's say, you wanted to upgrade a camera or an antenna on a satellite, you'd be able to simply do so by replacing a module. And the final benefit is that their implementation would reduce the overall cost of space development, increasing our capability to develop complex space systems. On the right, we have an example of a NASA spacecraft with 6 ORUs at Goddard Space Flight Center and a UR-5E robotic manipulator manipulating one of their modules. Here's a video created by Northrop Grumman showcasing a robotic manipulator grasping and moving an ORU and what a spacecraft might look like that is capable of easily being serviced and upgraded. Our research goal is to be able to perform this manipulation completely autonomously without human input. So to develop an autonomous ORU manipulation system, we broke our research into 3 main stages. First, we need to develop a training model for our agent. Next, we need to train the agent in simulation using our model. And third, we need to validate its performance in the real world. First, we'll talk about the creation of our training model. So to create a training model for our agent, we first found a reference for a modular satellite design, which can be seen on the left in the IBOS 3 satellite. And then we created our own design, which can be seen on the right to align with our research goals. Taking a closer look at our smart satellite design, the satellite is a 1 foot by 1 foot cube with 3 different ORU insertion points that align with the ORUs we designed. Each ORU can only be inserted in a specific orientation and only has 3 millimeters of tolerance to make the insertion. The interface of the ORU with the robotic gripper was also specifically designed to optimize grip stability for our robotic gripper, which can be seen in the red box at the top of the slide. Here's a photo of our smart satellite with an example of one of our 3D printed ORU insertion sleeves being bolted to one of its faces. The benefit of our modular design with our smart satellite is that it allows us the capability to interchange faces depending on the research problem we're investigating. So on the right, we have our smart satellite equipped with 2 mock solar panels for another research project we're working on. And we're able to switch out the modules depending on what we're investigating. The whole smart satellite is suspended over our robotic arms using a linear track we designed for this project. A rendering of the track can be seen to the left and a fully assembled track can be seen to the right. The track measures 16 feet by 8 feet by 6 feet, and the travels along the track using a linear bearing, which is highlighted in this slide. So now that we have our physical model designed, we'll move on to tackling training an agent in simulation. For our training, we opted to use deep reinforcement learning due to its success in training autonomous agents to perform peg-in-hole insertion tasks, which can be seen in this video. This video is not developed by our lab, but it does demonstrate how deep reinforcement learning is a viable method for training a robotic arm to perform peg-and-hole insertions, and how our ORUs can similarly be modeled in simulation. The agent will use trial and error to figure out how to best perform the insertion task over thousands of trials at different orientations around the robotic arm. We are currently working on building our simulation environment in NVIDIA Isaac Sim to train our autonomous agent, which can be seen on the slide. The environment is designed to align closely with the environment an orbital robot would have to deal with, such as low lighting and microgravity. The simulator also allows us the capability to train multiple robotic manipulators at one time, which can be seen to the left with 20 robotic manipulators all being controlled simultaneously. To conclude our research, we'll talk about how we will validate our autonomous robotic system in the real world once the agent has been properly trained. Our laboratory is equipped with 2 robotic arms on a linear 7th axis rail, which can be seen to the photo on the left. To validate the performance of our in-orbit ORU insertion task, we will use our Barrett WAM arm to hold our smart satellite and mimic zero gravity conditions. And this can be seen to the right with the robotic arm on the right holding the satellite and simulating zero gravity. And then we will use our UR5E robotic manipulator, which is on the left, to perform the insertion tasks, which can be seen in the figure. For our future work, we plan on creating additional test modules utilizing the National Institute of Standard and Technology's task assembly boards, which were designed specifically to benchmark robotic manipulation capabilities. We'll also explore the possibility of adding motors to our linear bearing, which would allow us the capability to move our smart satellite along our linear track to recreate satellites moving in space, and then train our robots how to safely grab a hold of them. Because in space, that's what a robot would have to do to perform these manipulation tasks. And to conclude, we were able to effectively assert that in-space assembly, manufacturing, and servicing are best suited for robotic agents, that ORUs are an effective method for simplifying satellite servicing, and that manipulation performance can be optimized via trial and error learning through reinforcement learning. And I would like to formally acknowledge Longsen Gao, a PhD student in our lab, Dr. Rafael Fierro, our lab's director and my mentor, the UMBC McNair Scholars Program, and the Air Force Research Laboratory for their guidance, mentorship, and support throughout this project. Here are the references for my presentation, and thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about our work.
Awesome job. Do we have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So it's regarding the model, the training model you did, right? It's like, so you shared like the 3D image. Is it arms? I could, like the arms of the, yeah, like
is it,
right,
okay,
like
is it this slide?
Yes, this is what you have in plan. But my question is like, how are you guys delivering this to the space? These arms.
Yeah, so these arms, they're all designed with these, if you see on the left, there's a modular interface for robotic arms. And this is a interface that was developed by NASA to standardize robotic arms, the connection points between robotic arms. So this is how Northrop Grumman is currently manipulating these objects in space, is they have a robotic manipulator equipped with just this standard interface that can connect to one of these modules. So in space, we're assuming, this is a simplified problem, we're assuming that our robotic arm is close to a servicing vehicle. So then we can simply take out a module, and that's part of the training, is removing an old module and replacing it with a new one. And so our training is assuming that both satellites are already connected, but in the future, we will need to work on having the satellites actually be connected as well.
Oh, so
I hope that answers your question.
Oh, okay, so you're saying like before in that model, there was like multiple like satellites, like multiple, there's like one arm, right? But that was connected to like multiple like kind of blocks. So you're saying in this model, it's just gonna be like one of the block that's connected to the arm, and that can be replaced in the satellite?
Yeah, so because our lab, we only have we don't have a full satellite, so we're just trying to recreate servicing conditions in our laboratory. So we'll recreate a satellite just with one robotic arm and our smart satellite, and our arm will be on the linear track, and we'll have our other track holding our smart satellite mounted above this robotic arm, which can be seen here. So on the figure on the left, you can kind of see how it's actually going to be modeled in the real world. And we'll train our robotic arm to do this manipulation using this setup. And then, of course, if we were to implement it in space, we would need to retrain the agent using actual robotic arms being used in space. But for right now, this is how we can best model space in our laboratory.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Giovanni.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Yes, wonderful job. We're going to move now to Nyla, and just to note, especially, I know we have our NSF as well as our Department of Ed folks. Some scholars do research with their particular UMBC program, and then some actually also do research as they go to REUs. And so we're grateful that they have the mixed opportunities. And Nyla, being one of my students from UMBC, had this opportunity to go elsewhere to do research. So she'll be sharing about that as well. Nyla.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Hunt. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nyla Howell. I'm senior at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, double majoring in geography and sociology. And my presentation will focus on the influence of disaster subcultures among small, medium businesses in coastal New Jersey. And so I did this project at Rutgers University with Dr. Robin Lichenko. Natural disasters impact our physical and social world. A growing number of studies have looked at disasters from a cultural perspective, and a concept that was developed out of that approach is this idea of disaster subcultures. A disaster subculture is a set of cultural elements that emerges within a community as a response to a disaster activity or disaster's impact. And these subculture elements can include behaviors, norms, and legends. One way that we can study disaster subcultures on a community level is by looking at small businesses, especially within coastal communities. And specifically small businesses within coastal communities because they are especially vulnerable to shocks and disasters, but they play a very influential role in their community social fabric and disaster recovery. So we decided to focus this research project on Northern Monmouth County, New Jersey, for various reasons. The first reason being they have a high concentration of small, medium businesses located in coastal communities. A second major reason why we decided to look at Northern Monmouth County was because in these four towns, Highlands, Atlantic Highlands, and Kingsburg and Middletown, they have a history of vulnerability to natural and man-made disasters. The first one was Hurricane Sandy in 2012. They were significantly impacted and they continue to be threatened by other coastal storms such as nor'easters. Additionally, they were impacted by 9/11. As you can see, they're right across from Manhattan. And so they lost dozens of residents in the 9/11 attack in 2001. And then more recently, New Jersey was one of the biggest areas that were impacted by COVID. And so their business community still is dealing with the impacts from the pandemic and dealing with shutdowns and just having less clients in general. This all leads me to my research question, which explores the relationship between the responses and coping strategies of small, medium businesses in coastal New Jersey to past disasters and the influence of these responses on business preparedness and community recovery. I answered this question by using 21 interviews from business owners and stakeholders within Northern Monmouth County, New Jersey. And this data was collected by the CC-run research team. With this data, I did two different content analysis. The first one sought to identify common or reoccurring disaster subculture elements that were listed within a highly cited paper, which is Wenger and Weller, and then another well-cited paper, which is from Granite, about the disaster subculture framework. The second content analysis that I conducted identified whether and how a disaster subculture element had influenced business preparedness strategies and community recovery. So this is the first, this graph shows the results of my first content analysis, which found that 95% of the interviews conducted identified at least one disaster subculture element. I also was able to find evidence of 4 different disaster subcultures. And so they were, the first one was 95% of the interviews showed evidence of a disaster subculture element from 95% of the interviews identified one disaster subculture element for Hurricane Sandy or coastal storms. 76% of the interviews also showed evidence of a disaster subculture element, and 32% of the interviews identified at least one subculture element for tidal flooding. And last but not least, we found evidence for 9/11, which was honestly beyond the scope of this project, but it was interesting to be able to look and find that that was something that was significant within the interviews. And so a couple of examples that we were able to find was first that there was evidence of preserved learning, which is significant to the development of a disaster subculture as cited in the literature. And so we saw that in relation to Hurricane Sandy and how they decided to go about physically mitigating the impacts of future coastal storms. The second example of a subculture element that we observed in literature was that interviews suggested that they normalized preparedness for disasters, specifically coastal storms. And so that was pretty significant in the literature, and also it came up a lot in the data as well. And then lastly, the COVID-19 pandemic created salient damage to the New Jersey community and economy. And so again, that was something that came up in the literature, just showing that damage went beyond, impacted beyond different social classes. So this graph shows the subculture element influence on business preparedness strategies and community recovery. As you can see, 30% of the interviews had demonstrated subculture influence on business preparedness strategies, and 33% of the interviews had supporting evidence of subculture element influence on community recovery. So for the first part, for business preparedness, these were some of the different strategies that were connected to subculture elements. So first, keeping inventory on wheels to remain prepared for coastal storms. A second action that was taken, that was added because of subculture element, was just being more strategic with post-disaster rebuilding of infrastructure. We had one interview talk about how they changed their wiring because they were known for being flooded consistently. And then the last one was business owners moving towards keeping sandbags within their shops as a result of tidal flooding. And then for community recovery, again, we were looking at connections between subculture elements and community with disaster recovery actions. So we saw that the subculture elements relating to COVID-19, which are resilient impacts and community solidarity, led to the rise of various food donation programs within the community, which again, leading to holistic disaster recovery. And then another example we saw was that salient impact from Hurricane Sandy led to volunteers, being more involved in local business cleanup and just coming down and being helpful in that way as well. So here we were able to find 4 main findings from this project. The first one was that we found evidence of a disaster subculture presence in northern Monmouth County. The second one was that we found evidence of 4 specific disaster subcultures. The first one was Hurricane Sandy. The second one, again, was the COVID-19 pandemic. The third one focused on tidal flooding, and last but not least, the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And then the third significant finding that we saw was that additional preparedness strategies were added, possibly because of the influence of disaster subculture elements, And then lastly, we saw that there was a possible relationship between disaster subculture elements and small business involvement in holistic community recovery. A few of the implications of this project. First, we were able to see that small businesses have lots of information that can be helpful in teaching their or other people about their community and how the community responds to disasters. Another thing that we learned from this project is that climate adaptation experts and local emergency managers can really take advantage of a disaster subculture and learning how their community has already adapted to recurring hazards. And so one of the ways they could take advantage of that is by, using the resources towards filling gaps in disaster preparedness where the community is not as familiar with that specific disaster. And a few limitations that I wanted to acknowledge is first, there was a small sample of businesses and community leaders in coastal New Jersey. And so I can't say that it's completely representative of the entire region and the entire region's present, the presence of subculture within the entire regions. And then the second limitation that I wanted to point out was that, the disaster subculture framework, there's not that much work on it. And so the important thing there is that, it's a rather limited definition of a disaster subculture, and there could be a lot more there because there's a work that needs to be done. So yeah, so here's some future research directions I'd be interested in moving in towards in the future. I'm interested in looking at disaster subcultures on more of an individual level and looking at how household preparedness and perceptions of hazards are influenced by disaster subcultures. And then also I'd be interested in looking into how inequality impacts disaster subcultures within predominantly racial minority communities, and looking into how we can incorporate social vulnerability in a new disaster subculture model in the future. And before I end, I just wanted to acknowledge the Consortium for Climate Risk in the Urban Northeast, which was the research team that I worked with during this last summer. And then I also worked at the Rise at Rutgers Summer Research Program, which funded me and also helped me do this project and the paper that came with this project. And then I just want to acknowledge the funding from NOAA and NASA, and then last but not least, the UMBC McNair Scholars Program for selecting me to speak at today's symposium. So yeah, here are my references. And yeah, here are a few questions. Oh, I'm ready to take questions, and thank you all for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nyla. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm not sure you went over it, but what was the purpose of keeping sandbags or business keeping sandbags? Is it for hurricane?
It's for tidal flooding. So tidal flooding is it's become more reoccurring because of the impacts of climate change. But basically, when the tide changes, because the elevation is so low, the tide will come in and flood just on any day. Like it doesn't have to rain or anything. And so when they know that either it's going to rain or they know that the tide is going to be higher, or like they are aware of like the different times, they are going to keep like sandbags in their businesses or around their businesses because they have become so normal. They've normalized the whole idea of like tidal flooding and being flooded. So it's a bit of a protection action.
Thank you. The thing is, how long did they started doing these like procedures? Like
I'm not sure.
Keeping their like inventory on wheels and stuff, because is it because of this? Like how many like times of tidal flooding must occur for them to realize like I need to do something about it?
So I'm not really sure. I do know that they have a history of it, but I'm not really sure when they started implementing sandbags. As far as the inventory on wheels, that was implemented after Sandy. A couple of businesses brought that up and talked about how they had to shift things around specifically because of the impact of Hurricane Sandy.
Oh, thank you.
Any other questions?
How would you, or have you thought about expanding the definition of disaster subculture? Have you thought about it, and if you have thought about it, how would you do so? How would you approach it?
Oh my gosh, I was hoping someone would ask this question. So I am actually working on my GRFP, my graduate fellowship research proposal now, with proposing that specific project. So looking at, I really want to incorporate the impact of social inequality and social vulnerability, because the definition comes with the assumption that communities are resourced and have the connections to be able to respond to a disaster. And we obviously know that's not the case, especially within racial minority communities. And so my hope is to do interviews or do case studies that focus on a different groups of people within historically racial minority communities. And I'm looking specifically at talking to community leaders, social justice organizations, and just community members within predominantly racial minority communities, just to get a sense of how disaster subcultures manifest in that community, because there's no work that has been done in that area. There's no connections that have been made with just differences in culture. So I think it would be really interesting to look more into it, and could possibly help us adapt our climate adaptation policies and programs around the different ways that people have already adapted to disasters, based off of histories of systematic oppression.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Nyla. Wonderful. And we're going to keep the ball rolling. Y'all are just rocking it. So thank you all. Oh, let me pause, because I have been forgetting to say this over and over, and my team has been putting it in the chat, but I want to say it publicly. Please fill out the evaluation forms to provide feedback to our presenters. And so there you will be able to see each person's name, and you can pick the name and you can share whatever information that you would like to. And especially if you have a question that was not responded to, or we're moving quickly through. So the students get these right, and it doesn't come to us directly. They get a copy of it. So please fill it out so that they can have your questions and your thoughts. All right. We're going to move right along with Ashley.
Can everyone see this and could hear me well?
Yes, we got you.
Great. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley Gellin, and I'm also a McNair Scholar at Penn State University in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology in the Okafor Lab. Now, my project I will discuss today is the evolutionary history of the liver X receptors and its implications for functional specificity. There we go. So the liver X receptor, also known as LXR, is a ligand-controlled lipid nuclear receptor. So what does this mean? Basically that this receptor requires a ligand to bind to allow it to go through a conformational change to activate transcription. So as you can see here on the right in this image of LXR, is that like most nuclear receptors, it has a similar structure. It's made up of a ligand binding domain and a DNA binding domain linked by a flexible hinge. Now, as you can see here, on the ligand binding domain, there is what we call an AF2 surface, which upon a ligand binding to this receptor, allows other co-regulator proteins, also known as helper proteins, to help and aid it in activating transcription. So LXR takes a pivotal role in cholesterol and lipid metabolism, which is why we're looking into it today for this project. So today we're going to address what are some of the features of ancestral LXR and how did its functions evolve? as well as how does it differ from its variants, alpha and beta. Next, we're going to look into how naturally and synthetically occurring ligands impact its transcriptional activity, and how does that activity compare to those variants. So looking into LXR, this is very much some preliminary data. But first, we want to signify that we want to understand the mechanism behind how ligand structure impacts selectivity between isoforms to avoid cross-reactivity, as well as undesired transcriptional outcomes. We also want to give insight on strategies that could be used for the development of LXR ligand-specific modulators that could be used in the potential therapeutics. So as I mentioned before, some LXR could be a potential therapeutic because it's a well-known target for chronic cardiovascular and neurodegenerative conditions such as type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So today our first aim will be to explore the structural evolution of LXR by expressing and purifying the LBD, also known as the ligand binding domain. And then two, we'll then investigate the ligand specificity of ancestral LXR and its isoforms alpha and beta, and compare this activity to its modern ancestors. So first, we then use traditional cloning and expression to purify and express our LBD. We also use various chromatography methods such as size exclusion and nickel affinity, which I'll go into. So here is a schematic of what traditional cloning and expression looks like, which is basically the process of taking our DNA sequence, multiplying it, inserting it into a plasmid, which you can see on the right, and inserting that into our bacterial host cell to mass produce our protein of interest. We then used various purification methods such as nickel chromatography, which, as you can see here on the bottom left, we basically took a nickel NTA molecule and bind that to our protein using a histidine tag on our protein, which allows us to properly isolate our protein from other contaminants and other proteins that may be in our sample. We then further use size exclusion chromatography to separate our protein from others by size. So after all these purification, we found that my ancestral LXR LBD is sized around 70 kilodaltons. As you can see here in this preliminary data, this SDS page gel, there is a broad, bright band amongst a 70 kilodalton size, which is exactly what we would expect because studies have already shown that LXR, not ancestral LXR, is around that same size. So we can confirm that that's our protein. Secondly, we want to look into how ligands are able to bind and interact with ancestral LXR as well as its isoforms, alpha and beta, and compare their activity. Studies have already determined that naturally occurring ligands such as 25-hydroxycholesterol and 22R hydroxycholesterol, as well as synthetic ligands such as GW3965 and T09 for short, can increase gene expression with ancestral LXR. So how do we determine how these ligands drive transcriptional activation? Well, we used a luciferase assay for that. We basically bound our ligands to our protein of interest and then provoked the activation and transcriptional activation of the luciferase gene to measure how well our ligands were able to bind to our protein of interest or a receptor. So as you can see here in our graphs, in the red, which represents ancestral LXR, ancestral LXR has increased activity when it's complexed with RXR, which stands for the retinoid X receptor. As you can see in the blue, there's increased activity overall. But when we take a look closer at LXR beta in the green, we see that LXR beta, when combined with RXR, has increased transcriptional activity with 22R as a ligand, as our natural occurring ligand. Whereas we have LXR alpha bound with RXR responds with a higher transcriptional activation or luminescence with ligands T09, GW3965, and 25H. So what does this tell us? This tells us, for one, that we already know that LXR alpha and beta are very, very similar. They have about a 77% sequence homology. But from this data, this would then suggest that LXR alpha has differing ligand preferences in contrast to LXR beta. This then could provide implications of how amino acid sequence derivations contribute to ligand preferences. And understanding ligand specificity, as well as the structural variations of these isoforms, can lend insight into developing isotype selective therapeutics. So I want to lend acknowledgements to first the Penn State Ronald McNair Scholars Program, with specific mentions of Mr. Curtis Price, our director, as well as Mr. John Twitty, our academic coordinator. I also want to lend for all the support and the guidance that Dr. Denise Okafor, as well as the Okafor Lab, has provided me as well. Does anyone have any questions? And thank you.
Hi, I have a question. So like I just find it interesting that like your last sentence of like you're trying to find therapeutics for like isotypes to that, because like it's I never thought about like how like drugs can be different based on like the different isomers of that molecule, because like this kind of brings me back to the like James Watson and Craig, when they were discovering the DNA structure. Watson was looking at the uniform of the structure, but like when it was actually in keto form, so that's why he was having a hard time deciphering DNA structure. So I just found that like really interesting about the isomers of different molecules can have different therapeutics, can react to therapeutics differently. And also, what does RXR stand for again?
RXR stands for the retinoid X receptor. It usually binds to LXR, as well as this applies to LXR alpha and beta. It forms a heterodimer to aid in activation of transcription for this nuclear receptor.
Oh, so that means like if alpha can bind to it and then cause transcription, but if beta, it won't cause transcription to that.
No, both can bind to RXR to aid in transcription. In one of my graphs, actually, when I was describing my data from the luciferase assays, I first used ancestor LXR alpha and beta by itself without RXR to compare how its activity is affected when not bound with its heterodimer.
And like just really quick, I've heard about histidine and nickel, but when would you use like nickel NTA compared to like histidine NTA?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
What's the difference between using, so for the chromatography, what's the difference between using like histidine NTA versus nickel NTA? Is it just like the charges, or like just like what the molecule binds best to?
Well, that molecule that you saw in that slide, nickel NTA, it specifically binds to the histidine tag that we apply to my protein, that of choice. So we did that on purpose. So we're able to isolate it during those chromatography methods.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I got mixed up because I thought like the histidine was on the chromatography column.
No, we did that ourselves.
All right, thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions? This is great. Thank you, Ashley. Oh my gosh, this is wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. And a special shout out to even Ashley and Curtis, her director, who changed their, and probably all of the students, many of you have changed your schedule just to make sure that you were able to be here at the hotel to do this today. So note that we are definitely appreciative. So thank you for that. We're going to have Ethan.
Yes, so let me just share my screen. All right, can everybody see it? Hear me loud and
Yes,
clear
go
too?
ahead and yeah, there you go. Awesome. There you are.
All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Ethan Feldman. I work under Professor Ali Tosiala. I'm from Rochester Institute of Technology, and our project is called Detecting Review Manipulation Using Transfer Learning and Heterogeneous Knowledge Graphs, or for short, Detecting Fake Reviews. So we're going to go over introduction, little review, methodology, and some findings. So if I was in a room, I'd ask everybody to raise their hand, but since I'm on Zoom, you guys can do some reactions. Have you ever purchased an item from Amazon? I should see everybody put some claps, put some thumbs up. Online marketplaces like Amazon sell millions of interchangeable products year-round. To help differentiate between these items, many platforms have developed reviewer and rating systems that allow sellers to build a reputation with their consumers. A study by Bright Local in 2022 reported that 80% of consumers read reviews before purchasing an item from Amazon. And these systems are gradually been shown to significantly influence consumer purchase decisions and are widely seen as crucial to the success of these online marketplaces. Because these systems are so vital for sales, it can be inferred that sellers have a huge incentive to manipulate the ratings and basically inflate the reputation. There is growing empirical evidence to suggest that this actually does harm consumers in 3 ways. 1, it favors lower quality sellers. 2, it allows sellers to charge higher prices. And 3, avoids smaller and honest sellers. What was previously seen as not a big impact by many economists has actually turned into a growing fake review market. Facebook in particular has been seen as the primary channels through which product companies recruit people to write misleading reviews, usually in the form of offering some payment or reimbursement. The number of groups has shown steady increase in these past years with no evidence of stopping. So what has been done previously to combat this? Machine learning has become a promising tool in recent decades for detecting this review manipulation, or detecting this manipulation in general. Graph neural networks in specific is my area of research, and we'll touch upon the advancements there. For those of you that don't know, some preliminaries before we get going. Machine learning, it's a branch of artificial intelligence which focuses on the use of data and creation of algorithms to imitate how humans learn. Neural networks, my field, is a branch of machine learning that uses principles to mimic the biological neural networks, i.e. your brain. And specifically, we're looking at graph neural networks, which is a type of artificial neural networks which processes data that can be represented as knowledge graphs. And knowledge graphs is basically an abstract data type that you would use whenever you want to store information about how things connect to each other. So any like social networks, any Wi-Fi networks, anything that you need that relational data, you would use a knowledge graph. Some common approaches in GNNs, the 2 at the top there, natural language models and feature-based GNNs, these focus on more identifying features and patterns of the actual reviews and manipulators themselves, while graph attention networks and label propagation focus on using the relationship data between other reviewers and other reviewers and reviews that could show some pattern in dubious activity.
Many of these models struggle with label scarcity, label imbalance. Most of them are a continuous data structure called a homogeneous structure, loss of data context, the list goes on. Our team has boiled it down to 3 main challenges. 1, that lack of ground truth data. 2, the lack of data structure diversity. And 3, model detection evasion. Our goal is to address these concerns with a model that can train with scarce data, diverse data, and can adapt to model evasion. Our approach is called a zero-shot heterogeneous GNN. It focuses on exploiting metadata, textual, and relational features on scarcely labeled data set. This approach is a novel GNN model with a label transfer function proposed by UNAL in 2022. It addresses the 3 challenges that I stated previously with a zero-shot transfer method, using heterogeneous data, and dynamic modeling, which is basically that the model can adapt over time. So going into the model itself. First off, this is our data. So this data was provided by my professor from a previous project, which will be linked at the end. It identifies 3,408 products, 1,400 of which are known to partake in buying reviews in this review manipulation. Their corresponding reviews, we have about 1.4 million. And the corresponding users, we have about 1.3 million. So for knowledge graphs, we have these different types of nodes, and then we have the edges that connect them. So review is about products, and user writes on review. It can all be linked together to create this knowledge graph. Some uniqueness about this data that's different from other data sets is that we're using both primary and secondary channels of information, the primary channel being Amazon and the secondary channel being that Facebook data that my professor collected in his previous project. So our task ends up becoming, if we have all this data on product, but we don't have any data on review or users, our task basically becomes, how can we transfer this information from nodes that have labels, product, to nodes that do not have labels, review and users. For our project, the product nodes are called the source nodes, and the target nodes are called review and user nodes. Our objective is to create an algorithm that learns a mapping function to transfer information from source nodes, product, to target nodes, target node labels, review, and users. Sorry to scare you with some math here, but basically this all boils down to trying to minimize the classification loss. So how well can our model actually classify things? And the transfer loss, how well it can actually transfer these labels from source to target. So what did we learn? Well, we're still in progress, but we do have some preliminary results. The current model has an accuracy of about 74%. When compared to a label propagation model and a basic GNN, we've seen about a 30% improvement than the basic GNN model. But that 74% is not conclusive enough to make inferences on the target data just yet. This accuracy comes from a product user subgraph, and it is the F1 score of the source data. So we are training this model on the source data first before we can train it on the target data. What you need to know is that the higher this accuracy is, the more we can trust the prediction that the model makes on the target data. Some limitations, since we are early on, we really need that accuracy to get higher before we can start making inferences. This could be done with optimizing features, tune parameters, and various structural tweaks. As well, we haven't used all the data that we have. We want to exploit more features in order to allow for better more well-rounded model. And currently, we do actually have a static model, so we don't have temporal data yet. But that is one of our goals, to make this model dynamic, as I said in the beginning. So why is this important? Or I guess, like, why should you care? Well, this is actually a very novel machine learning concept. So what's plagued a lot of machine learning models is the lack of ground truth data. A lot of models, either if they don't have that labeled data, they have to create it, or they have to inference something, and that adds a lot of bias into your actual statistical analysis. This ends up being a way to circumvent that and train on less data, that greatly improving GNNs as a whole in the machine learning community. So we want to, but in the context of our problem, we want to improve that manipulation detection, increase online consumer power, promote a fair market, and restore trust in these e-commerce platforms. I have some references here I would like to note. At the bottom there is my professor's previous project that goes into how he collected all this data. And on the right there is the actual model that we are using. This has more information about the statistics and the math, if anyone would like to look into that. Thank you for your time. I'd like to thank the McNair Scholars Program once again. And now I'm opening the floor for questions.
Some job. Yes. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Out of all the potential improvements in the model, have you thought about what one thing you can do to it to make the largest improvement? And if so, what would that be?
So I think the largest improvement that we can do is adding that temporal data. Something that's going to really help us out in the future is that we're finding that once a dubious reviewer understands the landscape, they can basically pivot and change how they manipulate their reviews. So by adding that temporal data, we can basically have it so that the model is accurately, like, keeping up with the times and keeping up with how reviewers manipulate reviews in 2023 and not like 2018, because that little time difference can actually make a large difference in model performance.
Go right ahead, Pedvi.
Pedvi, yes.
I think this is my classmates. But
Is it me? Is it actually me? Am I just using your link?
yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, see?
Oh.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, can you guys see me? Can you see
Yes.
me? Okay,
We can see you, we
hi.
can hear you.
Okay, so I was wondering, is the model, is it for like fake like robot reviews or fake human reviews or both?
That is a great question. Okay, I am prepared for this one. So well, so fake reviews differs from what we call incentivized reviews. So incentivized reviews is basically when sellers offer free or discount products in chains that they review with obligated disclosure and do not require a predetermined rating. Fake reviews, on the other hand, can be a bot review, but it can also be a person. So when we were looking at the Facebook groups, we were looking at a lot of products that actually, like, hired people would give them some reimbursement, some money, some payment to write a review to a specific standard. So let's say product A wants 5-star reviews on Amazon. They'll put out a campaign. They'll say, we'll pay you, I don't know, $50 to put a 5-star review on there, write this specific sentence, and then, you get your money, you call it a day. It also includes if a product wants to sabotage another product too. So it does include those bots, but these are also real people too. That is something that we've been able to, in the case of, let's go back. In the case of users, we're actually able to detect not just if the review is fake, but if the user is also dubious in nature and does a lot of review manipulation.
Okay. Could you tell that from whether or not they bought the product or just by like their pattern of reviewing?
We can tell that from the pattern of reviewing, which is the primary channel, but also in the secondary channel through the Facebook information, we can actually pinpoint that user. When we transfer it to Amazon, it gets a little bit more difficult because it's switching accounts. But if you kind of cross compare it with the two sites, you can pinpoint down which users are actually which users are actually doing this suspicious activity.
Okay. Okay, that's really interesting. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So is that related to what you're talking about, the source node and target node? Like, is this from source node, like trying to see if that's real or fake reviews and then comparing it? I'm not too sure. Can you explain the source? Why do you want to translocate the source node to target node?
All right, so we have a bunch of data on products that we know either partake in this review manipulation or do not partake in this review manipulation. The model that we're using, it will transfer that information whether or not a review is suspected to be manipulated or suspected to not be manipulated. And user, on the other hand, suspected if they are manipulating reviews, suspected if they are not manipulating reviews. Does that answer your question?
So the way you do this, like whether they're fake or not, is from like your you said the neural graph and then the knowledge graph that you guys make from your algorithm.
Can you repeat that? Sorry, it cut out a little
The way
bit.
you differentiate if it's real fake reviews, it's based on the algorithm you guys create, right? Using the neural network and the knowledge graphs.
Yes, it by combining yeah.
How do you assess the clarity of like how accurate it is?
So in the previous paper that we looked at, that went into the specifics of this algorithm, they have a really good section talking about like the proof of it and why this model can be trusted. It's a lot of statistics that I don't want to go into because then it would be a lot of time. But what ends up happening is that yes, we don't know for certain if our predictions on these target nodes are going to be 100% true. But what we can do is training it on that target information. We can get this accuracy up with the data that we know. And through that statistics from the previous paper, we can better trust the predictions that it's making. Like all machine learning algorithms, when you suffer from not having the data, you do kind of have to take your results with a grain of salt. Like when we actually get this accuracy up and train it on the target data, we really want to just identify patterns and we don't want to take it as ground truth. And with those patterns, we can better understand what actually is manipulation, what's not, or I guess what is suspected manipulation and what's not.
Yeah.
Awesome. We gotta move on. But thank you so much. This is great. I want you to connect so y'all can continue this kind of conversation. And it's actually what we encourage at the conference, right? And so find some time to just, hash out any other questions or thoughts that y'all might have with each other multiple times. And even on the cruise tonight, there'll be chances for y'all to network and connect. So thank you so much. Let's give a hand to our oral presenters. Ethan, wonderful job. And to all of you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. We're gonna try to studio our time. So take 3 minutes to stretch your legs, if you've been sitting, like take a stretch. We're gonna come back on at 10:35 Eastern time, and we will get right into the oral where we'll have oral presenters. So we're still just 5 minutes behind in our scheduling. So we'll try to keep that. So just take a moment. All right. I hope y'all were able to take a stretch. And we're going to get started. We have 2 presentations or posters. So these students would have been presenting posters at our conference, and instead they're going to do it here to share with us today. And so we're going to let you all begin. And then what we will do after the 2, we will do questions after both of the presentations. All right. So we'll have Pedvi and who is next? Or Lincia.
Okay. Hi, my name is Pedvi Lee. I am a student researcher at Dr. Matsui's Bio-Nanotechnology Lab at Hunter College. What our lab focuses on, one of our project that our lab focuses on is use of iron oxide nanocages for drug delivery. One of the main problems in drug delivery to tumor microenvironments, which are abbreviated as TME, is because of the dense extracellular matrix, which makes it hard for the drugs to pass through that barrier to target cancer cells. So currently, scientists have been using enzymes like proteases and UV radiation to break down these components of the ECM. But the problem with the enzyme is that they're complex, require multiple enzymes, and UV radiation is harmful, which makes them both invasive procedures. So last year, one of our PhD student, Mina, published a paper which shows that iron oxide nanoparticles, when put under AMF, can show grounding motion. So what she did was that she put firefly luciferase siRNA into iron oxide nanocages inside endosomes. As we can, let me zoom in here in the graph here. And after applying AMF, what she found was that the endosomes ruptured, releasing these nanocages, and these endosomes ruptured because of the grounding motion from these cages. Now, to measure the efficiency of this delivery of the siRNA, we perform the luciferase assay. So this siRNA used firefly luciferase siRNA, and if the siRNA targets the luciferase gene, we should see a downregulation of gene, which shows decreased expression. So when we see that before AMF, because the iron oxidase are still inside the endosomes, we don't see any change in expression. But after applying AMF, in which the endosomes are ruptured, we see that compared to control, the background, right, we see a almost like expression was half, which shows that the siRNA was delivered to the luciferase gene and downregulated that expression. Now, we set to answer just up. Can we take that Brownian motion that we did for endosome escape and apply it to disassembling the collagen hydrogels, which we're using as ECM mimics, since the ECM is composed about like 30% of collagen. So we want to know if applying AMF to collagen hydrogels with iron oxygen cages lead to collagen disassembly. And we hypothesize that applying AMF will cause collagen disassembly because of the Brownian motion. And what Brownian motion is just a erratic movement of the particles, in this case, our nanocages, that's caused from collision with the other particles in the medium. To test this question, we set up an epineal tube, and on the bottom of the tube, we have a water layer. And on the top, we have a collagen hydrogel, which was embedded with the iron oxide nanocages. And really briefly, to make these iron oxide nanocages, we use a process called galvanic replacement reaction. So first, we have a manganese oxide nanocube, which is the template. This is going to be the anode. And then we will add iron perchlorate, which will be our cathode. And the galvanic replacement reaction is basically the transfer between the electron chemical gradient between the iron being reduced and the manganese getting oxidized. And this causes the iron to accumulate on the surface of this cube. And then because the hollowness is based on the nanoscale Kirkendall effect, which means that the outward diffusion is greater than inward diffusion, causing this hollowness. Now, what we want to see is that after applying AMF, the iron oxide nanocages should have Brownian motion. And this Brownian motion temporarily dislocates or reassembles these collagen fibers, creating an opening for the iron oxide nanocages to diffuse into the water layer. Now, so we want to measure the concentration of the iron in this water layer in 4 different time sets. So we see that in 30 seconds, we see that there's about like iron start diffusing out from the collagen matrix into the water phase. And it remained the same until 5 minutes later, we see that almost 42% of the iron nanocages diffuse out from the collagen to the water reservoir. Now, to visualize the collagen assembly, we use optical birefringence by double refraction. So what we see here is that this is before AMF. So angular dispersion tells you where there's the presence of a collagen fiber, like the surface of it. And what we see, if it's dark blue, that means there's a presence of something there, of the collagen fibers there. And what birefringence tells you is that how are these fibers assembled? If they're assembled structurally like fibers, that means they will be shown with a bright yellow here. Now, after AMF, we see the reverse contrast. We see reverse phase in that it's different from what we see in the before AMF, in that we don't see any presence of fibers, which shows that the collagen fibers has disassembled. So based on these two results, there's an increased concentration in the water after applying AMF, and from the birefringence imaging, we saw the loss of collagen assembly. This shows that supports our hypothesis that applying AMF causes nanocages inside the collagen hydrogels to have show Brownian motion to disrupt collagen crossings, which disassembles collagen. So in the future, we would determine the correlation between the magnitude of Brownian motion to the degree of ECM disassembly using different collagen density. And then second, to increase the diffusion of iron oxide nanocages through the ECMs for tumor environments, and to test this in vivo, loading drugs inside the iron oxide nanocages and measuring its efficacy in tumor microenvironment. And finally, I would like to thank the grants that sponsor research and to the UMBC McNair Scholar for hosting and giving me this opportunity to present, and my PI, Dr. Matsui, and Hunter McNair Scholar Program Director, Dr. Basa, for support and guidance. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay, and then we'll come back with questions.
Okay.
So it's not allowing me to share my screen. Oh, now it is. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Orlensi Casillo, and today I'm representing SUNY Brockport on my presentation as I address the causes of the lack of diversity in the STEM field and answer the question, why does representation matter? So African Americans, Hispanics, amongst other members of the minority group workers have remained underrepresented in the STEM fields compared to their white counterparts. Hispanic workers make up only 8% of STEM workers, and Black workers make up only 9%. So these factors and components as to why there is a lack of representation in these technological fields, there's many reasons as to that. So this research addresses the causes of this lack of diversity and why it is significant. All right. So for some of the reasons for underrepresentation in STEM, according to an accumulation of surveys conducted by the Pew Research Center, the lack of diverse mentors and role models, and as well as limited access to advanced science courses, socioeconomic factors, and institutional biases are all contributing factors as to why we see less people of color in STEM fields. So a recent statistic conducted by the Pew Research Center, so 73% of most Black adults with a college degree believe that more examples of Black achievement in STEM would make young Black people more likely to pursue degrees in this field as well. So this statistic is higher for the Hispanic population, 81%. So seeing more examples of Hispanic high achievement in STEM would encourage more young Hispanic people to pursue college degrees in STEM field. Another recent study conducted by the National Academy of Sciences discovered that a diverse team outperforms a homogeneous team even more when the less diverse team had a relatively greater ability in what they were studying. And this is due because different people with different backgrounds bring a variety of perspectives and therefore approaching the problem in a unique way. So as a result, it develops into more innovative solutions. A quote I would like to bring out in this presentation is by Elia Pelton. She majored in computer science, and it says, if you don't see anyone who looks like you, then that's the very reason you do belong. Because your perspectives and ideas are unique, you'd be surprised how many people, especially in STEM, have begun to recognize the need for diversity. You are not only needed, but you are wanted. Some ways that we as a society can contribute to STEM diversity are celebrating the achievements of minorities in STEM, as well as creating a STEM network promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. Finally, I would like to thank the amazing mentors in the C-STEP McNair program at Brockport, Helen Cheeves, Barbara Thompson, and Andrea Newman, as well as the McNair program for allowing me to present today. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you both, for Lindsay and Pedvi. Any questions for the two? We'll take a moment now.
I have a quick question. Do you recall how the National Academy defined, what was it, greater ability?
Who's your question for, or do they know?
Or Lindsay?
Sorry, can you repeat that? It was cutting off. I'm so
sorry. Do you recall how the National Academy defined greater ability?
So by greater ability, it meant like it outperformed. So for example, you have two groups, one diverse group, people of color, different perspectives, and one where it's just the same. By greater ability, it means that even though the less diverse group knew more about the topic and had more knowledge than the diverse group was still able to outperform the other group. In the sense that, yeah, even though they had more knowledge on that topic, they were able to outperform.
Awesome. Thank you. Aye?
Yeah, I had a question for the first presenter at B.
Go ahead.
So my question is, because I also work with nanotechnology, I'm using synthetic nanocapsules for drug delivery. So I was wondering why it was important for you to encapsulate the nanocages in collagen hydrogels. What was the benefit of doing that?
Because the main purpose we want to know is whether we can temporarily disassemble the collagen. Because right now there's so okay, first of all, we're using collagen as an ECM mimic, since collagen is a big component of the extracellular matrix. Now, the way the collagen in the ECM, the way that scientists now disassemble the ECM, like to break down the dense ECM for drug delivery, is by using enzymes or UV radiation. But enzyme is complex. Like you need to use multiple. Sometimes you need to use multiple part of enzymes in order to even break down one. To break down like one part of the complex. But what we want to know is whether we can use like mechanical force, in this case Brownian force. In order to get this Brownian force, we're using iron oxide nanoparticles because they have ferromagnetic properties, which means that they can which means they have motion put under magnetic field. So the purpose of using this iron oxide nanocages is so that we can put it in EMF so that it can show Brownian motion. And we're using this Brownian motion, a mechanical force, to break down, to disassemble, not break down, but like temporarily disassemble and relocate the collagen fibers, which can create an opening for the drugs to pass through. So in the future, we're going to add drugs to these nanocages to see its efficacy in drug delivery. That's our main goal, trying to break down temporarily, disassemble the ECM, which we're using as collagen mimic, so that we can get the drugs delivered to the targeted tumor cells more easily and more effective. Does that answer your questions? Or did I make you more confused?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Let's give them both a round of applause. Thank you so much. Wonderful job. Wonderful, wonderful. Y'all just rocking it. Awesome. We will now have our last two presenters, and so Aaliyah and Mary Rose. So Aaliyah, you can share your screen.
Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties bringing up my poster. It's not popping up for me.
Okay, let's do this. Let's go ahead with Mary Rose for the moment. And that gives you some time to figure out. And then if push comes to shove, if you want to come down here, or if you want to email me your poster, and that way we can actually do it. And then since you're just doing a poster, I can just share my screen if that makes it easier for you. Okay, so go ahead and email me huntmi1@umbc.edu. I'll put that in the chat too, so if you need to pull it. Mary Rose, are you ready?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Mary Rose, a rising junior at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I'm currently majoring in psychology and minoring in social welfare. My project is called Digital Storytelling, Wellbeing, and Lao American Initiative. I'm creating a digital story as an independent deliverable for the UMBC McNair Scholar Research Institute. I am Lao American. My parents are from Laos and sought refuge in America. I was born and raised in Baltimore County, Maryland. I cycle pre-owned goods such as clothes and household items, which come from my closet and my community's closet. I'm documenting this experience through my lens as both an in-group participant and leader of the Secondhand Initiative. Despite the profound history between Laos and the United States during the Secret War, making Laos the most bombed country in the world, in history, Lao Americans are obscured in educational curricula, narratives, and research studies. There is a lack of awareness and action to support Lao Americans. This lack of support to address these issues are perpetuating the one-sided story of Asians, resulting in scarce resources for our population. The Lao American community is a vibrant and culturally rich group, but we face significant challenges such as high rates of low income and poverty, maintaining relationships, and connecting to our cultural community. Well-being encompasses these relational, emotional, financial, spiritual, environmental, intellectual, vocational, and physical aspects. Well-being sums up how healthy, thriving, and prosperous we are. As the dimensions of well-being for Lao Americans are impacted, the well-being of Lao Americans is of concern. We need to improve the well-being of Lao Americans. So according to the World Health Organization, promoting well-being focus on the tracking of equitable distribution of resources, overall thriving and sustainability. That brings me to my initiative. I'm building up a cultural tailored initiative that aims to uplift well-being. Over the past years, I collected thousands of items in the Lao American community in Baltimore. From this community, this redistribution refers to receiving items, selling, and trading items. So families give me items that they do not want anymore, and I redistribute them to those who do. So this also frees up their space in the environment and allows them to rehome the items to be used for a purpose. So this initiative is a reusing initiative, which is an affordable and sustainable method of addressing basic needs in communities. And it has impact on holistic well-being. Research shows that reusing initiatives directly improves environmental and economic aspects of well-being by reducing waste, decreasing resource consumption, and increasing awareness of sustainable practice and increasing savings. For my specific deliverable, I'm creating a digital story to highlight this Lao American initiative. I'm using digital storytelling to document and share my experience. I capture and collect visuals consisting of participants handing down items, selling items, trading items, and volunteering to help keep this initiative running. So what is digital storytelling? So digital storytelling is the use of multimedia tools which combines audio, images, and videos to create and share narratives. A pioneer of digital storytelling, Donna Ashley, said it well. Digital storying combines the best of two worlds, the new world of digitized video, photography, and arts, and the old world of telling stories. Digital storytelling is the use of multimedia tools to create and share narratives. So throughout this summer, I've collected thousands of pictures and videos. This includes images and videos and graphics in order to build a visual collection. During the storyboarding process is when I investigated what I noticed and came up with some message, takeaways, and themes that I found throughout my story. The script for the audio part of the project acts as a digital story essay. So writing the script did take a long time, but it revealed what I needed to attain media-wise. So currently, I'm working on publishing and making iterations of this digital story using digital editing software and platforms. So the direct outcome is to produce a publishable digital story that can be archived on a digital story site, such as UMBC Digital Storytelling. So an indirect outcome is that the audience who watches this digital story is able to take away a sense of agency, community engagement, and resourcefulness. So this is a platform in which underserved and ethnic minority populations could greatly benefit from these tailored and specific solutions from these digital stories. So this project highlights the importance of community-based services, such as reusing items and empowering and supporting individuals and communities. So this specific project aims to document and share the story of one of my initiatives as a Lao American leader of myself through this secondhand initiative through redistributing pre-owned clothing and items. So the moral of the story is that for future directions, both awareness and action is needed to drive implementation, and with the use of digital storytelling and the act of these initiatives, this can improve holistic well-being for individuals, communities, and the greater good. So special thank you to UMBC McNair program for funding and UMBC Elaine McDougall in helping me create this digital story. Thank you so much.
Awesome job. Alea, and we'll come back with questions and stuff from Mary Rose in a minute. Let me share my screen for you. All right, so can you all see my screen okay? And Alea, you can go ahead and begin. You should be fine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Fields, and I'm a senior at Oklahoma State University. And just a quick disclaimer, I know my poster says American Indians, and I use that term just because that is what is most commonly used in existing literature. But for my presentation, I will be using the term Native Americans. So this past summer, I focused my literature review on the challenges that Native Americans might face while living on reservations, and then the general impacts of each of those challenges. And to clarify on reservations, reservations were formed with the Removal Act of 1830, and Native Americans were forced to move from their traditional land into land allotments appointed by the US government. Now there are roughly 326 reservations in the US, according to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And to begin my research, I began looking at common health inequities associated with adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs. And because of this, I ended up including poverty and substance use into my research and search terms. And to clarify on ACEs, those cover a really wide variety of different experiences one might face in childhood or adolescence, and they could be more normative, such as growing up with divorced parents, or more traumatic, such as physical or sexual abuse. And results from existing literature shows that rates for ACEs, poverty, and substance use were all higher for Native Americans, especially living on reservations compared to other populations. And for example, one study involving 288 Native reservation living participants, 78% experienced at least one ACE. And then when it comes to poverty in this specific population, the BIA reports that the income on reservations is 1/3 of the national average, and 1 in 4 Native Americans live in poverty. Substance abuse is also a really prevalent issue, and results from another study included in my literature review showed that Native American youth have higher rates of substance abuse compared to a national sample. And after examining the overall prevalence of these issues, I moved on to the general impacts of each. And for ACEs, literature suggests that they have an impact on depression, drug use, and suicide attempts. And poverty can have an impact on the learning of children due to chronic stressors, and chronic stress can have an impact on the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, which are vital for learning and memory. Apart from academic achievement, an existing study showed that childhood poverty can also have an association with future drug use. And then substance use has an obvious impact on overall health, but also mental health and suicide attempts. Overall, my literature review examines the prevalence of these challenges and how big of an issue ACEs, poverty, and substance use are within the Native American community, specifically living on reservations. And the purpose of studying this community is to spark conversation, promote change, and potentially create resources for them. And personally, what I have noticed in my research is how connected each impact and challenge is with each other. And they kind of all interlocked and lead into one another. And I would assume this would cause a continuous cycle of these challenges. And if I were to continue this research, my next steps would probably be to create an anonymous survey where participants could partake in a tribal healthcare facility near a reservation. And I would potentially like to focus on including degree of blood to see if there is a difference for those with a higher degree of blood compared to those with a lower one. And overall, research on this community is very scarce and should be continued to be expanded on. And I believe good next steps would be examining potential resources for these communities that are culturally inclusive. And I would like to thank the McNair Scholars Program for giving me the opportunity for conducting my literature review. And I would also like to thank my faculty mentors, Dr. Cole and Dr. Chichola, for their guidance and mentorship throughout my research. And thank you all for listening.
Awesome. All right. Wait a minute. Y'all still see my screen? Wait a minute. Let me stop sharing. There we go. Okay.
Hi, Alea.
Awesome. Yes, go right ahead.
So like we were talking about the Native American Indians and how the different types of adversities that has hurt them. I feel like I wonder if we can like kind of connect this to Mary Rose. Like because Mary Rose was talking about like what the Layouts community is doing to what the Layouts community is doing to kind of like help themselves as immigrants. So did you try to like what are the ways that these American Indians are working as a community to help themselves?
Yeah, so a lot of, I think a big issue with some of these challenges could be funding, but the tribes for their specific tribe, because it's not really Native Americans as a whole necessarily, but it goes by individual tribe. So I'm Cherokee, and so I know a little bit more about my tribe, but I know they give resources for college students and they give scholarships. They also have housing available that is pretty discounted rates compared to the average rent in those areas. And they also give funding for Native Americans trying to buy a house. So they'll give money for a down payment for a house. And all the healthcare facilities, those can who have a CIV could come in and get treatment for free or very, very discounted. I feel like there's many different things that the tribe does. The only reason why I think some of these issues still might be so prevalent, even though there are resources and opportunities given by the tribes, is just because of the lack of funding, just because the tribes create all the funding from casinos or things like that, but the money can only stretch so far when there's only one source. So
Okay, just a random comment, not random, but like do you know like the pipeline? I think like I don't know how many years ago there was like pipeline that was going to be being built under the Native American land. And I was wondering if like if there was like okay, sorry, never mind. There's a comment I didn't just thought of.
Awesome. Any other questions for the two, Mary Rose or Leah?
I had a quick question for both, actually. I wondered if you all had an opportunity to share the results of your findings with those communities, and if so, what were their responses?
Yes, I can first. So the data itself are images and media that the participants themselves have already seen. But in terms of the result of the digital story, that has not yet been published, but is expected to be published this semester.
I have not been able to share this with my community yet. I would, if I, were going to, I'd really like to include my own personal survey and study into that, but I have not yet.
Awesome. All right, let us take a moment to give a round of applause to all of our speakers, our student speakers. Phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal. And thank you all for the questions and engagement. And as we shared, please fill out the evaluation there. And because we're a little running behind, take the break as you need. I know folks have gotten up. I hope you've gotten up. I know I got up a few times just to make sure the blood was still rolling in my legs here. And so we want to make sure that you are doing the same. But we're going to continue on so that we can get back on schedule and provide space for our NSF leaders to sort of share resources with you and to talk with you now. And so I am going to, you all should have access and we're going to just let you go based on your order on the agenda there. And so please, you'll be able to unmute yourself and also share your screen as you need. Dr. Norman, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Yeah, we at NSF have actually been anticipating this for a while now. The first mention was actually Dr. Hill that said, well, what about the McNair scholars when we were talking about doing some extensive outreach for NSF, particularly for GRFP, but for NSF. So we are excited actually to hear your presentations today. And I learned a lot, which I usually do in these things. It's nice to hear from the future research leaders and future Lao leadership, which was great to hear from today. So my job in this presentation is to hopefully build your understanding about NSF before I pass things along to my colleagues so that you can, of course, have a long-term relationship with NSF, not just today for this meeting. So I am Nakrisha Norman. I'm a program director in the Division of Graduate Education and the director for STEM education at NSF. So NSF is an independent federal agency. We support science and engineering in all 50 states and US territories. NSF was established in 1950, so we've been around for a while. The purpose is to promote the progress of science, advance national health, prosperity and welfare, and secure the national defense. Our mission is chiefly making grants. We actually support 25% of federally. We provide 25% of federal support for American colleges and universities for basic research. Our vision, of course, a nation that leads the world in STEM, and that's in research and innovation to benefit all without barriers to participation. Our mission, of course, is to promote the progress of science, investing in research to expand the knowledge in science, engineering, and education. And our core values are scientific leadership, diversity and inclusion, integrity and excellence, public service, innovation, and collaboration. NSF is made up of many directorates, anything from biological sciences, the geosciences, to STEM education. And what all these directorates work towards is providing funding for research, activities and opportunities in STEM and STEM education. Today, we want to focus on undergraduate and graduate opportunities for you all to look for at NSF. And I just want to quickly show you how to find those. So this is our main nsf.gov site. There are many different ways to find funding opportunities. So this is not just as you're an undergraduate or moving into graduate school, but throughout your career in academia and in business, we have resources. So if you're looking at finding funding, specifically, if you click on that finding funding link, you can look as a researcher when you become early career, when you're a postdoc, graduate student, undergraduate, entrepreneurs, and industry. So that was my goal today, was to put that plug in and hopefully stick that in your memory. I'm going to thank you and pass things along to Dr. Weber to talk more about our ETAP program.
Okay, are you all seeing my slide presentation and not my notes?
Yes.
Great. Always want to check. All right, good morning. My name is Liz Weber, and I am a science education analyst in the Division of Graduate Education and the NSF Director for STEM Education. And I am really excited to be here with you today and have the opportunity to share with you the National Science Foundation's Education and Training Application, or ETAP, which provides a free common application system that can help you find and apply for a variety of opportunities to advance your education, your career in STEM. This overview should only take 10 minutes, so I hope we'll have plenty of time at the end of the discussion to take questions. And I'll also be leaving you with more information about ETAP and how to reach out if needed. So what is ETAP? ETAP is a secure online common application platform that NSF developed several years ago to connect applicants with opportunities that are made possible by our NSF-funded awards. As the system has grown over the past few years, it's increased the number of NSF programs that it supports, and it now serves applicants ages 13 and older, and those all across the stages of their educational and career journey, from pre-college to undergraduate to graduates, post-baccalaureates, and professionals like teachers. So ETAP provides a transparent and centralized location of information on training opportunities, and it reduces your burden by virtue of having a common application that you can repurpose across multiple training opportunities that are funded by NSF and hopefully over time as well. Over the past year, ETAP was used by almost 19,000 applicants, and the majority of these were undergraduates. This is more than double the number of applicants and opportunities that we saw in the prior year, so ETAP is growing fast. There are currently 13 NSF programs using ETAP to offer a really wide variety of opportunities. So when I say opportunity, this can mean a scholarship, a fellowship, an internship, a boot camp, a research experience, mentoring, or more. These are just a few that I've listed here that are providing opportunities to undergraduates. So there's, of course, the research experiences for undergraduates, or REU program, where NSF funds institutions that can then provide undergraduates with hands-on research experiences and stipends. Some of these opportunities may also provide assistance with housing and travel. There's the international research experiences for students, which is very similar to the REU, but it gives students the opportunities to travel and pursue research outside the United States. There's the CREST program, or Centers of Research Excellence in Science Technology program, which offers a variety of STEM education training opportunities at minority serving institutions at the undergraduate, graduate, postdoctoral, fellow, and faculty stages. And then the NSF Scholarships in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics program, or STEM, which provides scholarships to low-income students enrolled in STEM associates, undergraduate, or graduate programs. So these are just a few that I've highlighted. There are more programs available, including some that are focused on specific disciplines like engineering or biology or computer science, and of course, for graduate school, post-baccalaureate, and beyond. While our list of participating programs is growing, it's really important to note that ETAP does not contain all NSF-funded opportunities at this time. And you can go and learn more about some of our programs using ETAP by visiting the programs section on the ETAP website. Getting started with ETAP is easy, and on the slides that follow, I'll provide some more details on how to navigate ETAP. You start by creating an account with ETAP, identify and apply for opportunities, and then the opportunities will reach back to you by email to notify you of admission decisions. The first step with ETAP is to complete a registration form that'll ask you to provide some basic information about yourself, contact information, demographics, and your education background. Some of the items are optional, and for key required elements, you are given the option to mark that you do not wish to provide that information. Opportunities may then go on to request you provide additional information. For example, they might want transcripts, reference letters, personal statements, or they may ask you additional questions that are relevant to their process. Applicants can use ETAP to request their reference letter writers and monitor their status within the ETAP system. So letter content, of course, is kept confidential, but applicants can send reminders or add more reference letter writers if it looks like somebody is unresponsive. And as an applicant, you don't have to keep reaching out to the opportunity to see if your reference letters are there yet. ETAP will help you see when they arrive. If you navigate to the opportunities page on ETAP right now, you can search for opportunities that are of interest of you. You can type in a keyword or select from filters, including the location of the opportunity, the particular STEM discipline, or the target audience, for example, undergraduate or graduate school. You can do this even before you set up an account, but getting set up with an account allows you to save opportunities of interest. We do have opportunities available now. I think I just checked and there's almost 30. Historically, November and December has been our most active period. That's when a lot of the research experiences for undergraduates and other programs start posting their opportunities. So we do recommend that you come back and check ETAP periodically as new opportunities are going up all the time. And they all do, of course, have very different application cycles. So that's something to watch. And as your career progresses, as I mentioned, post-baccalaureate, graduate level, and professional level opportunities are there too. So you can continue to keep using ETAP hopefully for years to come. When you do find an opportunity that you're interested in, when you click that Apply Now button, you'll see expanded information about what they're offering you. Each opportunity will contain details to see if it's a good fit for you. There's an overview section. They'll provide the application window, what type of research or disciplines are involved. They may provide other links to their website, the location that it takes place, and any eligibility requirements. Each opportunity does have its own unique URL. So when you select that Share Opportunity button, you get that unique URL and you can share it with your friends or post it on social media for others that might be interested in it as well. You can also select that heart button next to the opportunity to save it to your favorites and come back and check it out later. ETAP is looking to make continuous improvements. The site is mobile friendly and 508 compliant. And over the past year, we've been working to add features to improve the user experience, including allowing you to preview your application before you hit submit, and to allow more control over application materials you add, such as resumes and transcripts. ETAP has also generated some helpful guides, which I'll drop in the chat if I can, as soon as I stop screen sharing. These include a flyer summarizing what I've just shared with you already today, as well as a step-by-step guide for applicants on how to navigate ETAP to create an account, find and apply for opportunities. And you can feel free to share these with others. Last, ETAP does have a dedicated help desk that's accessible by phone and email, and it's ready to assist you as applicants with a range of questions. And the team is very knowledgeable, so they know when it's a question that doesn't belong with them, it does need to go directly to the opportunity. So please do reach out to them if you need any help. In addition to the help desk, the site does include answers to frequently asked questions. And we also understand there may be cases where individuals may run into reliable internet access issues or have other access challenges. The help desk is your point of contact there. They are ready to support you, whether it's with a paper application or other means of support. And with that, I think I'm done. So I can turn it over for questions, or we can go to the next presentation. But thank you all so much for taking the time to learn about ETAP today. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and please reach out to the help desk too if you need more info.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
All right. For the, I believe you said it was for post, is it postdoc or is it post-bac opportunities?
We have both on the site. Post-baccalaureate was probably the one that I mentioned. That's for people who have graduated but aren't currently in like another training program, graduate or other.
Okay, so that is also on the website, more information there, etc. Okay. And then also, you mentioned you mentioned research, like undergrad research opportunities. It seems like from that picture that you showed of one of the opportunities, it had like a school. Like I don't know how it really works. Do you like go to the school and do that, or is it something where you go to like a company, or do you like stay where you are online? Can you kind of explain some of the
Yeah.
opportunities that you have?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a choose your own adventure. It'll be whatever, it's up to the opportunity to determine. So some of these could be virtual, some of these could be based at an academic research institution, a nonprofit, an industry site. It's really going to vary. So you'll have to look at those. For the research experiences for undergraduates, I believe those are primarily academic institutions. But some of our other places offer very different, just a wide variety of things. So.
And you don't have to be like, let's say I'm looking at a school in, a school that I don't go to. You don't have to be at that school in order to do the research opportunity.
It will depend on the opportunity. So some of them will note, they should note in the eligibility requirements and the overview if it's something that's only open to theirs. So we do see a mix of those. Where you might need to be a current student. So just make sure you check closely the eligibility requirements to see if it works for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Curtis, you had your hand up next, I think.
Yeah, just real quick. Awesome presentation, and thank you for the information. Just wanted to know if there's any plans to share this with McNair directors. Because we have McNair scholars who may want to tap into this, and just wanted to know if there's any plans to share this with McNair community nationwide.
This is, I think, the first time we've actually reached out to applicants. We've done a lot of NSF program PI outreach so far, but definitely get in contact with us if you have a recommendation of a venue that we could share this with, so that they could help, disseminate this to their scholars so that they can use this. And let me drop the second flyer in the chat too. So feel free to share those.
Okay, awesome.
Welcome. Thanks. Ashley?
Hello. Yes, I was actually wondering if there are internships and co-ops available database.
Yeah, internships are something that also get offered through here. Again, this is all, so the way it works is PIs so investigators on NSF funded awards go up and put this on there. So internships are there, but it'll be something, again, check back from time to time because they all have their own cycles for looking for applicants and recruiting. So it's really important to keep going back in and looking for what you're interested in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Giovanni.
Yeah, thank you for presenting this information. I do have a question. Does NSF plan on having all of their programs be funneled through ETAP eventually, or will there always be like the NSF GFRP? Will that always be a separate application, or what is the plan for that?
I can't speak to the NSF GRFP's plans at this time, Nakrisha, or them too, but certainly we do appreciate how nice it is for the community to have a single route to apply to these. GRFP is just one of our many programs, of course, and this is really more for supporting those programs that are offered for through our institutions, right? So rather than having to go to the various institution websites and figure this out, which is pretty onerous to find out even where they are, you would have a one-stop shop. So certainly we are interested in growing it, but there's no plans at this point for this to be like the only place you would go right now.
Great, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you all.
Can I just say something? Like
Sure.
I've used this ETAP platform before when I was applying for Hopkins REU program.
Oh, great. And I hope it was a good experience because you're smiling.
No, I didn't get in. Like I just
Hopefully the site though was not a pain point. So
yeah, it's a good site because you get to like upload a recommendation letter, and I think you can. I think is this what you said before? Like the recommendation letter, they're like kept or stored there, right? So you can use it for the other programs also.
Yep, that's an advantage. So you can request that confidential reference letter and have it in the system and repurpose like your transcripts and stuff again. All right, thank you all so much.
Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
That's great. Well, I hope some of you are thinking about going to graduate school. And if you are thinking about going to graduate school, you might be wondering how you're going to pay for it. What we're going to try to talk to you a little bit about today is a great opportunity for people who are going into graduate school, either for a master's degree or a PhD, a doctoral degree connected with STEM. I'm going to try to give you a little bit of an overview of this great opportunity that can help you pay for your graduate education. It has a lot of parts to it, and I'm going to try to give you some of the major components connected with this great opportunity at the National Science Foundation. But if you're interested, here's the place you can go for more resources: www.nsfgrfp.org. So after you hear what we're talking about today, if you're still interested, that might be the next best step. Here's the plan for the talk today, and I hope this will give you a little bit more information about GRFP and help you explore the possibility that this might be a good fit for helping you fund your graduate education. First, we're going to talk a little bit about, just give you some general information and a description of GRFP as it fits into the National Science Foundation. Then we're going to talk a little bit about eligibility and also about the kinds of things we don't fund, so that in case you're interested in this, but when you're listening, you say, oh, I'm interested in doing this thing and that thing, and maybe those aren't the kinds of things that are funded through this particular opportunity, through this fellowship. And then we'll look at the application package itself, the different parts of the application, and what the reviewers are instructed to look at when they evaluate that application package. And then we hope to have a little bit of time for your questions. So first, a little bit about GRFP. It's been around since 1952. That's when the first awards were made. And since then, over 70,000 fellowships have been awarded. And today, that leads to someone receiving $37,000 for 3 years. Each year they get $37,000. And the institution they go to receives $16,000 to help with the education, the cost of education. And with that money that's sent to their institution, they waive the tuition and fees that are connected with that year of your graduate education. So for 3 years, you get this fellowship, and you can spread it over a 5-year period, and you can use it for both a master's or a doctoral degree in the eligible fields. And the kinds of fields we're talking about are shown here: chemistry, life sciences, psychology, computer science and engineering, materials research, social sciences, engineering, math sciences, STEM education, geosciences, and physics and astronomy. So there are quite a few fields that are connected with STEM. If you're thinking about going to graduate school, this might be a great opportunity for you. Usually we have about 12 to 13,000 applicants each year, and generally there are about 2,000 offers made. Last year we had about 2,500 offers made. And there are many fellows from all across the United States, from every state, and we're hoping that you're interested in it, and that if this fits, you'll take advantage of this opportunity and explore this possibility. So the big picture is this amounts to $159,000 to help fund your graduate education. It's 3 years of financial support, and as I said, it's It's connected with a $37,000 stipend each year, and then your tuition and fees are paid by the institution, and we give them some funding to help with that. The fellowship is interesting in that it is awarded to an individual. That is, you as an individual apply, and then the award is made as an offer to you, and then based on where you decide to go to graduate school, we send the money to the university, and then the university will give you the money. But the award is made based on an application from an individual, not from your professor or from your university, but by you. And it allows you to go to graduate school. And you can choose your project and your advisor and your graduate program as long as they meet the eligibility requirements. Once you have the fellowship, there are no service requirements. Some fellowships require that after you're done and you graduate that there are service components. We have an annual activities report, and you have to declare what you're going to do for the next year, but there are no service requirements after completion. And you can use it at any accredited nonprofit U.S. institution of higher education, as long as they have a research-based master's or doctoral degree. Every year, there are about 2,000 fellowships, new fellowships that are offered. So for example, right now we have about 9,000 fellows. And the success rate, well, now it's around 20%. Historically, it's been increasing. In 2021, it was about 17%, and it's increased every year. Now, the overall goal of GRFP is to select and then recognize and, as I've mentioned, financially support individuals who have demonstrated potential to be high achieving scientists and engineers earlier in their careers, that is, as graduate students, early in their graduate career. And an important aim is to broaden participation in the full spectrum of diverse talent in STEM in our country. There are some requirements, and I thought we'd start off with that. You can get more details by looking at what is kind of the instruction manual for an application. And at NSF, at the National Science Foundation, those instructions are called a solicitation. So if you're looking on the internet, you could look at NSF 23-605. That's a more detailed version of what we're talking about today. And in there, you'll find information about eligibility and about the different types of people that can apply. And I'll go over some of that in a broad way right now, so you just get a feel for the kinds of things that are connected with the requirements. So first of all, you have to be a US citizen, a national, or a permanent resident. You have to apply early in your career, either as an undergraduate who is going to go to graduate school next year, or as a first or second year graduate student. You have to be pursuing a research-based master's or doctoral degree. That is, you're not looking to get a professional degree. It has to be in STEM. We're talking about the National Science Foundation funding, so it's STEM or STEM education. You have to plan to be enrolled full-time for working on your graduate degree. And as I mentioned, it has to be an accredited nonprofit US institution. That means no foreign institutions, no international institutions. And so if you look on the right-hand side of this image, you can see the different kinds of students that could apply. And basically, there are students that are in graduate school, and there are students that are not in graduate school. So a level 1 applicant would be somebody that is either an undergraduate, a senior, or somebody that's got a bachelor's degree but is not in graduate school. So if that might be one category that you would belong to. In other words, you don't have any graduate study. And one of the nice things about that is, as long as you're in that category, you can apply for this fellowship year after year after year. In other words, if by chance you don't get it the first time you apply, then as long as you're in this category, you can apply again, okay? Now, once you start graduate school, you can apply during your first year, and we call those level 2 applicants. And you can also apply during the beginning of your second year. That is when you have no more than 1 academic year completed, okay? And there are special cases where people have bachelor's and master's degrees at the same time. We have different rules with that, but the basic message is that if you're a graduate student, you can only apply once while you're a graduate student, okay? There are other examples of people that might apply, and that would be as somebody that already has a master's degree, but they've been out of school for at least 2 years, and they don't have a doctoral degree, and they're not currently enrolled in a graduate program. Under those conditions, you could also apply, and those are called level 4s. Well, so I hope this sounds really interesting to you, and what we want to do is give you a list of the kinds of things we don't fund, because sometimes people get pretty excited about this opportunity, but then they find out, unfortunately, that the kinds of things they're thinking about pursuing in terms of a graduate education just don't really fit with this particular funding opportunity at the National Science Foundation. So examples of that are if you're really thinking about pursuing what we would call a professional degree, that is, let's say an MBA, a business degree, or a medical degree, or a law degree, or let's say going into dentistry. Those kinds of things, those professional degree programs, we don't fund through this program, okay? And even programs where you're getting a PhD, but you're connecting that where it's kind of a joint program with like a law degree or a medical degree, those aren't eligible either. And then programs where you're talking about community or global or public health or social work, this isn't the opportunity for that. And most types of education and history degrees aren't really funded through this program, except if it's STEM education, right? If it's connected with science and engineering education or the history of science. So we want you to know that right from the beginning. And if you have some questions about that, the best thing to do is look at that solicitation I was talking about. Now, besides graduate programs like a PhD, an MBA or something like that, there are some areas of research, what we call fields of study, that we also don't fund through the National Science Foundation and GRFP. And that's because there are other funding opportunities, federal funding opportunities. And you can see some of those here. So for example, health-related fields of study, outcomes research in health services or clinical trials, applied research on plant pathology or food safety. Those are ineligible fields for GRFP. And we just wanted to remind you of that, just in case those are the kinds of things you were thinking about, then this really isn't the answer to help funding for graduate education. But if you are interested in a field that is funded, there are a couple different parts to the application, and we wanted to talk a little bit about that. And the application is online. For this year, for funding to go to graduate school next year, the application deadline is this coming October, almost about a month from now. And so if you're thinking about going to graduate school next year, you need to be thinking about this application right now. But if you're thinking about it for future, then just remember that the application deadline is usually in October. Historically, it's been in October. So there's a part of the online application that's about a place where you can include information about your education and your past research and work experiences, like the kinds of things you talked about today, and any awards or publications or honors you might have. And then there are two statements that you have to write. One is a personal relevant background and future goals statement. And that's a 3-page paper. And then there's a 2-page graduate research statement or research plan. And then you also have to submit your transcripts and letters of reference. And when you get into the application, you'll find out that you have to send us at least 3 names of people that will be notified that you've requested that they send in letters of reference. 2 of those letters have to come in. So that's really important part. And I will talk a little bit more about some of this so you get a feel for it a little bit. But I did mention the deadlines, and the deadlines this year are in October, and the actual day of the deadline depends on what area of science you're interested going into. So if you're going to go to graduate school in the life sciences, the deadline is October 16th. It's almost exactly a month from now. And you can see the other ones. So for just as another example, engineering is the 19th. It's all during 1 week, but there are different deadlines for different fields of study. And if you're not thinking about going to graduate school next year, so you're not thinking about applying this year for next year, then just keep in mind that the deadlines are usually, let's say, the 3rd week in October, okay? So here's kind of how a normal year goes in terms of thinking about the timeline for GRFP. Like I mentioned, about a month from now in October, the applications are due, and a week after that, the reference letters are due, and all that's submitted online. And then if you're an undergraduate or somebody that isn't in graduate school, of course, you got to apply to graduate school. So you send in your materials to NSF for applying for GRFP, but then you need to apply to graduate school because you have to be ready to go to graduate school the next fall. Well, the process moves forward, and then usually in late March or April, we make the final selections and the announcements, and the fellowship offers are made. And then in May, the people that have been offered a fellowship have to let NSF know that they're going to accept the fellowship and also where they're going to go to graduate school. And then what we do here at NSF is send the money to the graduate school, and then you'll be ready to start your fellowship in that next fall, usually in late August or early September. So that's the general timeline. Now, what do people look at when they're evaluating your application? Well, we use the same criteria that NSF uses, the National Science Foundation uses when we review proposals. Now, these are applications for a fellowship, but we use the same merit review criteria. And those are intellectual merit and broader impacts. So even in the application, when you submit your 2 written statements, you're required to have these 2 headings, intellectual merit. And what I mean by that is really, how does this address advancing knowledge, okay? And then broader impacts, you also have to have a heading for that. And that's really about how this application and for this fellowship would benefit society or advance desired societal outcomes. So when a reviewer looks at your application, they're going to be looking at all those parts I mentioned in terms of intellectual merit and broader impacts. They're going to be looking for the strengths, and they're going to be looking at the challenges in terms of whether your application provides evidence for the potential in terms of intellectual merit and broader impacts. So just to emphasize that, applicants are reviewed based on their demonstrated potential for significant achievement in STEM. And the reviewers use a comprehensive, holistic approach, looking at all parts of the application. And we really aim to have a comprehensive review of the application. when people are writing the two statements for the application, they often ask, what do we mean by the potential to advance knowledge? What would be the kinds of information that would be useful for a reviewer to have there? Well, things about, for example, any evidence you can provide about past experience and skill sets connected with planning and conducting research and working as a member of a team, or working independently, interpreting and communicating research, or just overall evidence of taking the initiative, solving problems and persisting. Those are the kinds of things that are going to be used by the reviewers in terms of evaluating the potential to advance knowledge. Now, also your grades, and they might look at the transcripts and evidence that you have in your application connected with your research plan in terms of the major field of study and how it may contribute to the advancement of knowledge in that. And it can be found in all parts of the application, not just those statements. Now, in terms of broader impacts, that's the second criteria. And what we mean by that is there are a lot of things that could be included in broader impacts. Examples would be increasing participation for underrepresented groups, such as women or persons with disabilities or veterans. And outreach and mentoring, those are examples of broader impacts that you could include as evidence. Increasing public scientific literacy, public engagement, community outreach, increasing collaboration. Those are all examples that you might find in an application connected with broader impacts, and they could be found in all different parts of the application. So thank you for listening to me talk a little bit about this great opportunity. I hope it's something that you are excited about. I hope you're excited about the future, your future in STEM. And here at the National Science Foundation, we see you as the future of STEM. And we just can't wait to see what great things, what fantastic things you do. And if you have some—
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all. I just wanted to say this as we close today. It is important and vital for these kind of partnerships to happen because what you heard today, both from the presentations and even from the presentations from NSF and the students, is that the future is bright. The opportunities are there. And what also we're excited about is that our McNair programs, and actually our students actually have opportunities are there, but sometimes not shared, right? Or they miss it, right? And so you all being open to one share, but then also our students being here to receive, and vice versa. Like this is what it's about. And so we are grateful. We're grateful. We're grateful. They will send us the slides, and we will send out the slides. We'll share the recording, and they've asked us not to share the end questions for the NSF questions for the GFRFP. So we'll edit that out. So the questions that were shared at that point, they will not be in the recording. I got to figure out how to do that, but we'll figure it out. It'll work. It'll work itself out. But either way, we want to say thank you to everybody for sharing and for this partnership. And we hope we can continue this in the future and for our next conference, providing such an opportunity as well. Congratulations to all. And I think she's still on, Cynthia Hill, who is my predecessor in the beginning of my director when who started the McNair program at UMBC. And so we are grateful for your presence here as well. And she's one of the shoulders that I stand upon. And so I just want to say thank you, Ms. Hill, she's up there in Ohio. And I'm great. Just know that we're grateful for your presence in this space as well. And then lastly, I did also want to highlight one of the scholars. And I think if I can get the name right, because I just want to was it Alea, where we had issues with her slides. earlier. I just want to say thank you, Alea. Alea was actually had they had flight issues yesterday, and she literally got to the hotel like 1, 2 o'clock this morning, based on after having a whole day of travel disaster, what have you. So I just want to honor you in this space too, and say thank you for showing up and bringing your authentic self in this space too. And to all of you, thank you for all that you do. Have a wonderful day. The conference will continue, and more information will come about this partnership in the future. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you. Thank you all.
You too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Good one.